It has barely been 7 hours, viewers, since that helicopter hit the ground in western Tamil Nadu. But India is still coming to terms with the death of its topmost military leader, Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat. General Rawat, his wife Madhulika, and 11 others succumbed to injuries suffered in a horrific helicopter accident in Coonoor in Tamil Nadu. They were on their way to Wellington when the Indian Air Force Mi-17 V5 military helicopter crashed in the mountains of Coonoor. This is how that horrific tragedy unfolded.
9 a.m. An Indian Air Force Embraer aircraft carrying at least 9 people took off from Delhi for Wellington Air Base in Tamil Nadu. 14 people were on board. That included CDS General Bipin Rawat, his wife Madhulika Rawat, Brigadier Ellis Liddar, Lieutenant Colonel Harjinder Singh, Nayak Gursevak Singh, Nayak Jitendra Kumar, Lance Nayak Vivek Kumar, Lance Nayak B. Sai Teja, and Havaldar Satpal. 11:35 a.m. The chopper made a stopover at Sulur Air Force Station in Tamil Nadu. 11:45 a.m. The Mi-17 V5 chopper took off for its next and final destination in Wellington, Coonoor. 12:20 p.m. The Mi-17 chopper crashed into a gorge in the jungles close to a tribal settlement near Kateri, 7 kilometers away from Coonoor and 10 kilometers away from Defence Service Staff College in Wellington. 1:40 p.m. News of the Indian Air Force helicopter crash carrying Army Chief General Bipin Rawat broke. The chopper was found in smithereens along the foggy hills of Coonoor in Nilgiris, Tamil Nadu. 1:45 p.m. 3 people with severe burn injuries were rescued by locals and taken to the hospital at Wellington Cantonment in Nilgiris district for treatment. 1:53 p.m. The Indian Air Force puts out a tweet confirming the army chopper was carrying CDS Bipin Rawat had crashed. An inquiry was immediately ordered to ascertain the cause of incident.
Plane helicopter அப்படி வந்துச்சு ஒரே சவுண்டு கருகுமுன்னு சவுண்டு வந்தோடனே கீழே ஒரு மரத்தில் அடிபட்டு வரையிலேயே நெருப்புல வந்துச்சு. நெருப்புல வந்தோடனே இங்கே ஒரு பெரிய மரம் இருக்குது. அந்த மரத்தில் வந்து அடிபட்டோன்னே கீழே அப்படியே தட்டார்னு விழுந்தோன்னா புகை வந்தோன்னே ஒரே தீ.
2:11 p.m. It was hard for rescue and relief teams to access the accident spot. With help of local tribals, the army managed to reach the forest area. Charred bodies were recovered from the crash site. 2:30 p.m. At least 6 ambulance teams with 12 members each were rushed to the crash site. Out of 14 passengers, 13 were confirmed dead.
அப்புறம் அங்கேருந்து கிளம்பி விரைவாக வந்துட்டோம். மூமெண்ட்லேயே நாங்கள் இருந்தோம். ஸ்பாட்டில் டப்புன்னு அங்கேருந்து ஓடி வந்து இங்கே இடையில வந்துட்டு எங்கள் 5-6 வண்டி வராது வழி இல்லை. ஒரு காட்டுக்குள்ளே இருக்குது. நடந்து தான் வந்தோம். ஒரு 2 கிலோமீட்டர் நடந்து வந்தோம். வந்து விரைவாக வந்து செயல்பட்டனால 2 உயிரை நாங்கள் காப்பாற்றினோம். ஆனால் இப்போ எப்படி இருக்காங்கன்னு தெரில. ஒருத்தர் வந்து 90% தீக்காயும், இன்னொருத்தர் வந்து 45%.
3:30 p.m. In Delhi, the Defence Minister briefed the Prime Minister on the crash. The situation was being monitored closely. Later, Rajnath Singh and Army Chief General M.M. Naravane visited General Bipin Rawat's residence in Delhi.
Defence Minister, as he gets down the car, a strict security cordon is being maintained right here outside the residence to ensure that there is no chaos.
As hours passed, hope began to fade. At 6 p.m., the Indian Air Force officially announced General Bipin Rawat, Mrs. Madhulika Rawat, and 11 other persons on board died in the unfortunate accident. Bureau Report, India Today.
We've been getting reactions right through this evening since the confirmation first broke here on India Today that General Bipin Rawat, his wife Madhulika Rawat and 11 others have lost their lives so tragically in this horrifying accident. Gaurav Samant, my colleague, continues to be with me here on our non-stop coverage. Also joining us this evening as we pay tribute and try and detail this horrifying tragedy for our viewers. We have the privilege to have Air Marshal Padamjeet Singh Ahluwalia, former Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Western Air Command. He's a veteran aviator and a pilot who has been deeply involved in flight safety as well. We also have with us Group Captain Amitabh Ranjan, who's a former Indian Air Force pilot. He has extensive experience flying the Mi-17. Gentlemen, welcome. I wish I were welcoming you on a better day, but we truly have a monumentally tragic story that we are reporting to the country, to our viewers, and to the many families of military personnel who are watching us this evening. Air Marshal Ahluwalia, to you first, sir, your sense of what has happened. I mean, this is an unspeakable tragedy. The loss is, it's difficult to put into words, but your sentiments, your thoughts on what has happened, sir.
It is indeed a great tragedy, and we must convey our condolences to the CDS and his family, the late CDS and his family, and to all the others who perished in this accident. It is very unfortunate that we had to have this accident at this particularly critical junction.
Yes.
Where we are facing some sort of aggression from our northern neighbor, and we will miss the general. We will miss him for his leadership. We'll miss him for the threads that he was putting together in terms of synergy, getting the three services to cooperate and to be able to execute conflicts in the future. And so therefore, that is the first thing that we are going to have, is a great loss for a great soldier, a great loss for the military, and a great loss for others to look up to for the execution of what he has left behind in terms of getting the three services together. The next thing, of course, is that we must also remember that all the others who perished, the 11 others,
yes,
we must pay our condolences to them and their families too. The question comes up as to why these accidents happen and what happened in this case. At this point in time, it's difficult to make a conjecture. The Aircraft Investigation Board will have moved. In fact, they're about to land in that area, and tomorrow morning they will start their investigation as to what transpired.
Yeah.
They'll be able to get the CDR and the FDR and perhaps the voice recorder, if it's available and not burnt up completely, to help them to find the cause of this great accident and this great tragedy. The weather was fine. There was nothing untoward as far as the weather and any difficulties in that way. The terrain was known. And this was a flight that was taking off from an airfield, Air Force airfield at Coonoor, which is next to Coimbatore. And it was on its way to an airfield at Wellington, where the DSSC or the Defense Services Staff College is. And Wellington is next to Coonoor.
Yes.
So unfortunately, it was on the way for him to attend some function at the Staff College. And this was about 12 odd kilometers from the landing site at Wellington that this tragedy occurred. The aircraft, the helicopter, the Mi-17 V5 is state-of-the-art, upgraded version of the Mi-17.
Yes.
It has souped up engines. It has all the safety features that you can imagine. It has a glass cockpit. It has a tremendous secure autopilot. It has all the navigation aids that you need, the best avionics. It also has a weather radar. It has been time tested. It has been upgraded to be able to meet the requirements of the VVIPs that the Air Force flies day in and day out. So there doesn't seem to be any failure as such. But once again, I say it will be preemptive on my part to make a suggestion as to what could have gone wrong.
Understood.
Once the CDR and the FDR is found, the reasons will be obviously available to everybody.
Absolutely. Group Captain Ranjan, the Court of Inquiry team will be landing anytime now, as Air Marshal Ahluwalia has confirmed to us. They will begin their very, very difficult job of piecing together all the broken pieces of this tragic accident at first light tomorrow morning and begin to make sense of what caused this monumental tragedy. You're an Air Force pilot. You've flown Mi-17s in similar terrain. There are very many different conjectures coming, and I agree with Air Marshal Ahluwalia. It's wrong to make any conjectures. But can you throw some light on the kind of procedures that the Court of Inquiry will go through right now? I'm guessing there is material evidence on the ground. They will also be questioning the eyewitnesses and first responders. Am I right? Can you just throw some light on what happens on the ground where the helicopter crashed now?
First of all, salute to all the warriors who were on board,
Yes,
and Mrs. Rawat. And we wish for a speedy recovery of the only surviving officer who will have the first-hand account of whatever actually happened. That is the first thing which we will go about. Now, coming to your question, I agree with Air Marshal Ahluwalia absolutely on what he has brought out. That conjecture at this point is not worth it. So the first things which the investigation board comes out is retrieving the CVR and the FDR, as I had brought out earlier on your show. So that is a cockpit voice recorder and a digital flight data recorder.
Yes.
So these are the things which will be brought out, which will bring out the exact sequence of events till the time it lands up. What happened and when did it happen? And subsequently, the Accident Investigation Board will be carrying out interview with all the eyewitnesses and all the people involved in this flight operation that would start from, let's say, at least a week previous to this accident as to what all this aircraft had done, which servicing it went through, who were the crew involved, what happened and why it happened and how it happened will be the last which will come out. Back to you, Gaurav.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, Gaurav and I are both here together on this coverage, Group Captain Ranjan. It's conjecture we're going to leave aside for the moment because it's important for the professionals on the ground, and Air Marshal Ahluwalia has led the Indian Air Force's aviation safety department for many years and has done seminal work there. So he knows what he's talking about when he says that it's too early to guess at what may have happened because of the inherent complexity of an accident of this kind. In fact, Gaurav, I'm now going to tell our viewers a little bit about the Mi-17 V5 helicopter because there is also a great deal of questions about whether this helicopter was old, was it unreliable. Air Marshal Ahluwalia has answered that question straight out. You couldn't get a more expert view on that from a senior veteran like him. This was the helicopter that crashed, in which Chief of Defence Staff Bipin Rawat and 12 others have lost their lives. It's an advanced military transport helicopter that's been with the Air Force since 2012. India got these helicopters to strengthen its chopper fleet for humanitarian and disaster relief missions and transport operations. Here's a little bit more about this helicopter that is at the very spine of India's logistics fleet.
Chief of Defence Staff General Bipin Rawat, his wife Madhulika Rawat, and 11 others lose their lives as an Indian Air Force Mi-17 V5 helicopter crashes in Coonoor. Only Group Captain Varun Singh survived the crash. Sources tell India Today, Wing Commander Prithvi Singh Chauhan was flying the advanced military transport chopper. He was commanding officer of the 109 helicopter unit. Mi-17 V5 choppers joined the Indian Air Force fleet in February 2012 after India expanded its 2008 contract with Russia for strengthening its chopper operations. The Indian Air Force currently has over 200 Mi-17 V5 helicopters in service. Manufactured by Russian company Kazan, the advanced helicopter comes with a weather radar and latest generation night vision devices, which makes it fit for high altitude operations. It can carry a maximum weight of 13,000 kilos with an additional payload weight of 4,000 kilos. The helicopter is equipped with self-defense system against heat-seeker missiles and heavily armored cockpit. The self-sealed fuel tanks are filled with foam, polyurethane and are protected against explosions. It is the most technically advanced helicopter of Mi-8 family of helicopters and is fitted with advanced TV3 117 VM engines. The military transport helicopter has been involved in crashes earlier too. In 2017, 7 people died as a Mi-17 V5 chopper crashed near Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh. 4 years earlier in 2013, 20 people died in a chopper crash in Uttarakhand during a rescue mission during flash floods. Bureau Report, India Today.
Gaurav, I want to quickly bring you in on this, the Mi-17 V5 helicopter, comparatively speaking, a new helicopter. These helicopters began arriving sometime in 2012. Air Marshal Ahluwalia has already, spoken quite extensively on these helicopters. They've got weather radars, they've got other equipment on board. These are helicopters that have shown themselves and acquitted themselves excellently. These are, there's nothing wrong with these helicopters. The safety standards of the Indian Air Force are also extremely high, Gaurav.
Shiv, who better than Air Marshal Ahluwalia to tell us about these Hepters and Grupi Ranjan. They've flown, Grupi Ranjan has flown these Hepters. Right when the Kargil war was happening, and that was the time that I interacted with then Air Commodore Pudding Ahluwalia for the first time. Subsequently, they made an emphatic case for more powerful helicopters to be brought in with souped up engines to be able to carry men and material quickly to Siachen Glacier, to Kargil Heights, to high altitude, and they've been used extensively in Jammu and Kashmir, in Ladakh, in the Northeast with their avionics, their ability to fly high, with their ability to see through, the radars that can see through weather trouble and all of that. Also, with their big tanks, they're able to fly longer fuel tanks. So, extremely capable Hepters, to an extent modified for Indian Air Force for their specifications to be used in high altitude area and used extensively for VVIP flying. So when Prime Minister Narendra Modi has to fly, these twin engine helicopters are the ones that the President, the Vice President, the Prime Minister, the Raksha Mantri, the service chiefs, they use these Hepters very extensively. It goes on to show that they're extremely safe.
They're extremely safe, they're extremely reliable. Only a court of inquiry will go into the details of specifically what happened in this particular incident. So I'd like our, viewers to ignore conjecture and speculation, especially of the kind that you encounter on Facebook or Twitter or on other social media. Air Marshal Ahluwalia, I also, I want to change track a little bit and get some insight from you, sir, because, you've been an Air Force commander. You've commanded men and women in uniform. You've seen tragedy happening in the Air Force. You've seen how units actually deal with it. I want to ask you, sir, the Air Chief has travelled down to Sulur. He's going to be there in Coonoor tomorrow as well. What would be happening at the Sulur Air Base right now from where this helicopter took off, sir? The commanding officer of that helicopter unit has also tragically perished in this crash. What would the senior leaders and senior commanders be telling the men and women and the staff there at Sulur? Just give us a sense of what it would be like there, sir.
Well, the first thing I think we need to understand is that we have to why did this happen?
Yeah.
And how did this happen? So whatever the documentation regarding this particular helicopter, when was it serviced, how was it serviced, and who serviced it, will all be seized. All the documentation will be seized in the sense that it will be put separately so that it can be referred to by the Accident Investigation Board. The Accident Investigation Board will be on site tomorrow morning, first light. And the first job that they have to do is to find the CDR, the crash data recorder, the flight data recorder, and the voice recorder if they can, and if it's undamaged. So what will be happening in that Salur will be, well, certainly, I mean, they are human beings, notwithstanding the fact that aviation and military aviation is a risky business, and we have to accept the risk that goes with military aviation, or for that matter, any aviation. There will be a sense of depression in the unit which was involved in this accident, in the sense that the helicopter belonging to that unit, which was based at Salur, there would be a sense of loss. There will be a little bit of demoralization, and that is where the leadership will come in of the unit itself. The Air Force is trained. The personnel are trained for these kind of circumstances that, you know, they have to, like they say, they have to live to fight another day. So all in all, that's what will happen. They'll get assistance in terms of any support that they need from the higher leadership. The leadership in this case will be the Southern Air Command, which is based at Trivandrum. And not only that, we must understand that this is a VIP aircraft. All aircraft are safe to get airborne. They're certified safe to get airborne. But this sort of a VVIP helicopter will carry out a few more checks to make sure that there is no slip up. There is enough redundancies. There are enough checks and balances by putting more people to do the same thing. So as far as the people are concerned, I'm sure that they must have done a good job. They would have done their job. Let's have no doubts about it. The other thing is, you know, what causes accidents? The first thing could be human error. A human error happens when, you know, there is a mistake which is committed by the pilots. In this case, the weather was fine. The helicopter seemed okay. So there was, I doubt, I can't conjecture again, but perhaps human error has to be eliminated. Now we have to see as to what would be the technical defects. And if at all, the technical defects will be identified after, once again, I'm repeating the same thing, the CDR, FDR, voice recorder are located. So we have to isolate these things. And the weather, we have to see what kind of weather. There was weather, about 5 octa. The total of 8 octa is the total covering of the sky. So you can say 5 out of 8, the sky was covered with specks of stratus clouds. So there could have been a little bit of in and out of clouds. The chances of flight into terrain would be like it happens in Tawang and places like that in the northeast, where you have to get into the right valley. You cannot get into the wrong valley because there's no point of return there. You just got to go and hit the hills. So all those conditions have to be considered before the aircraft gets airborne. The aircraft will not get airborne unless the weather conditions and all these other conditions are met, more so for VIP/VVIP flights. So the Air Force takes great pains to make sure that the aircraft is right, it's fully serviceable, it is capable of carrying out the mission without any incidents or accidents. The pilots will always be exceptionally well trained. They'll have bags of experience. Which is most important as far as aviation is concerned, the kind of experience that you've got. And as you see, the Indian Air Force, you get pilots who are trained in flying in the high mountains of the Himalayas and to the sea. All the ONGC missions are done by the same aircraft, the same helicopter. ONGC missions, over the sea for the Bombay high airfield, oil fields, and Kargil, high altitudes. All these, just like Gaurav professionally put out, is done by this particular aircraft, the Me, that is MI or V5. That's what is referred to.
Yeah.
So all in all, there is great caution and there is great precaution that is taken to launch these aircraft so that they do their mission safely.
And you know, I don't want there to be any doubts about professionalism in the Air Force and the Indian military, because that is beyond doubt when it comes to such cases. And Air Marshal Ahluwalia, in many ways, is the last word on that. So he has spoken. So I will not add anything more on that. I'd like to, since we have these two veterans with us, Group Captain Ranjan, I also want to ask you about how units. During such tragedies, when an aircraft has crashed in this manner, what happens at these units, for the families? Is there a structure by which someone is keeping in touch with them, updating them on information? Because, in this frenzied world of media, we see a lot of things being said on media, on the internet. So how are the families kept updated when some things like these happen, sir?
Okay, first of all, I have been in a unit where I had unfortunate accident of one of my own coursemate. That was way back in 1995. Okay, so basically every Air Force, or I would say every armed forces establishment, is very well geared to take care of the families. They immediately form liaison cells at the unit level, which interact with the family members directly. And at the higher formation, the station provides the necessary support. The command headquarters, they also extend their help. And the air headquarters arranges for the transportation of the families also. From, let's say, if the bodies have to be brought from somewhere, or if the families have to be sent somewhere. All these things are arranged, things are taken care of. There is a proper accounting which is done for each and everything which an individual owns. And then comes in the financial matters. Those are also taken care of.
Yeah.
Every minute detail which you could imagine is taken care of in case of any tragedy hitting any armed forces personnel. And at Air Force level, seen it firsthand, been a part of it. So I can assure you, the families are informed physically by individuals from the unit themselves.
Yes.
They form a liaison team. Secondly, the most important, as Air Marshal had brought out earlier, it is the fighting spirit which has to be kept on. So in case of an accident, it does not happen that the unit gets into a mourning mode and stops being a military formation. They generally, by the next day, after all the machines are checked up for any suspect, generally that unit has to fly per force. That is how things happen. That is how the leadership takes over. The second rung of leadership, the third rung of leadership, that's how the military establishment works. Back to you.
Group Captain Ranjan, if I may, you've had an opportunity to see the wreckage, pictures of that wreckage, and we see the tail rotor portion. It's a clean break.
The tail boom.
The tail boom. In your appreciation, would the cockpit voice recorder or the flight data recorder, would they be safe? Or there are some burn marks that we noticed there. Would they be damaged? Can we make out from this point?
It's at least halfway through the tail boom that is cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder are placed. And one is kept down below where it can be, where it generally avoids all the impact. And with any impact, these two devices, they come out very, very safe. That much, at least at Kazan helicopters also, where we had visited, we had found they had done the crash worthiness of these aircrafts, and these things were found to remain intact. In addition, there is an ELT which also transmits as soon as an accident. So, in my appreciation, these things would be intact.
Okay, so we're going to wait for word from the ground. We have reporters who are also arriving in Coonoor in just a few minutes from now. So we'll have the first ground reports from the site as well. As responsibly as always, we will only report what the agencies are giving to us formally. We will not speculate. We take what Air Marshal Ahluwalia and Group Captain Ranjan have told us very, very seriously because. Yes.
Can I mention one point?
Please do, sir.
Well, Shiv, it's very important for me to say this, that security is a very, very important aspect at our bases and for protection of the aircraft to avoid any untoward incidents where anybody can get in and sabotage. Sabotage is taken very seriously. And the precautions, for instance, this kind of aircraft, which was flying a VIP, would have been sanitized at least many hours before. Sanitized in the sense protected and checked for any untoward object, etc., lying over there to make sure that sabotage is eliminated.
Yes.
And sabotage cannot be the cause of any accident. So that's the first thing that will be checked by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board.
Okay, so that's okay. That's an important point because, and I'm glad you made it, Air Marshal, because there are lots of people talking about the possibility of this. Some prominent analysts have also, just put it out there, saying that there's always this possibility of sabotage. So it's important that you've clarified that things are not taken lightly at all in such situation, especially in VIP flights. Before I come back to that safety aspect, General Bipin Rawat was a soldier on a mission. He had been appointed just a couple of years ago as the country's first Chief of Defence Staff, not even 2 years ago. It was in 2019. The 63-year-old had a reputation of being a tough soldier and an inspiring commander. And that was something he embodied till his dying breath.
Vast experience in high-altitude warfare. An expert in counterinsurgency operations. He dedicated 43 years of his life to his motherland. General Bipin Rawat was among India's tallest defence chiefs. An alumnus of the National Defence Academy and the Indian Military Academy, General Rawat was commissioned into the 5th Battalion of 11 Gorkha Rifles of the Indian Army in December 1978. But General Rawat learnt his first lessons in defending his country much earlier, from none other than his father, Lieutenant General Lakshman Singh Rawat, who had served in the same unit, 11 Gorkha Rifles. During the 4-decade-long service, General Bipin Rawat held multiple positions. General Rawat was also part of a United Nations peacekeeping force. His tenure as Deputy Chief of Army saw the Indian Army launch surgical strikes on terror launch pads deep inside the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
These surgical strikes were a message that we had communicated, and that if required, and if the adversary does not behave, then if we have to continue with these kind of activities and events, we will continue. But there are other ways of doing these things also. It did not take the same form.
General Rawat was the 4th officer from the Gorkha Rifles to become the Chief of Army Staff on 31st December 2016. 3 years later, in 2019, General Bipin Rawat was appointed as India's first Chief of Defence Staff. The post, which was recommended after the Kargil War for better coordination between the Army, Navy and Air Force.
तीनों सर्विसेज जो हैं, उसका 1+1+1 का जो जोड़ आता है, उसको 3 नहीं बनाना है, उसको 5 या 7 बनाना है. So you have to achieve more through synergy and integration. ये मकसद है जो CDS को जिस तरह से टास्क दिया गया है.
During his service, General Rawat has been decorated with multiple medals for his grit and valor. It included the Param Vishisht Seva Medal, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, Vishisht Seva Medal and Sena Medal. General Bipin Rawat's death comes as a huge blow to India and the armed forces.
Now, the mortal remains of General Bipin Rawat, his wife, Mrs. Madhulika Rawat, and 11 others who tragically perished in this crash, including 2 pilots from the 109 helicopter unit in Coonoor who were flying this helicopter. They will all be brought to Delhi tomorrow evening, we are told, for a state funeral. It is an incredibly sad and tragic story that is still being processed and digested by a shocked nation, and we will continue to report it as sensitively as we have the power to do. I'd like to thank Air Marshal Ahluwalia, Group Captain Ranjan, for joining us on this discussion to throw more light on what is, after all, a tragic and developing story. Chief of Defence Staff Bipin Rawat was at a speech just last evening before he left for Coonoor and then for Wellington. Last evening was a speech on disaster management, and last year was a year during the pandemic when he was still committed to speaking on occasions to the military brass. That was his commitment to his work. And at Agenda Aaj Tak last year, he spoke on the 5 qualities that every soldier must have. This was something that he was very passionate about and spoke about very often. Listen.
कोई भी नौजवान जब अपनी प्रशिक्षण के लिए अपने ट्रेनिंग सेंटर में जाता है रिक्रूट बनकर, बाद में भारतीय सेना में तैनात होने के लिए, किस तरह के विचार उसके इंस्ट्रक्टर, उसके प्रशिक्षक उसको ध्यान देने में बार बार उसके दिमाग में ये गढ़ते रहते हैं कि ये विचारधारा सदा आप अपने साथ लेकर चलेंगे। और इस विचारधारा को मैं सिर्फ 5 शब्दों में दोहराना चाहूँगा, और वो है, हर एक जवान को ये सिखलाई दी जाती है कि आप जिस भी कार्य को करने जा रहे हैं, आपने इन 5 शब्दों को ध्यान में रखना है, और वो है नाम, नमक, निशान, वफादारी और इज्जत। तो इन 5 शब्दों पर, इन 5 तत्वों पर एक सैनिक की नींव जड़ी जाती है। ये 5 शब्द इतनी गहराई से उसके दिमाग में बैठा दिए जाते हैं कि जब भी उसे किसी कर्तव्य का पालन करता होता है, इन तत्वों को ध्यान में रखते हुए उसे आगे चलते रहना होता है। और जब तक भारतवर्ष के सैनिक इन 5 शब्दों का अमल करते रहेंगे, तब तक मैं यकीन के साथ कह सकता हूं कि भारतीय सेना को के ऊपर अगर कोई बुरी नज़र डालेगा तो उसका नष्ट कर दिया जाएगा।
We're taking a very quick break. More reactions coming in from the government and the military. We'll update you on that after this very short break. Stay with India Today's coverage of the death of General Bipin Rawat.